Hey everybody, welcome to Cheeseology. I'm Adam. In this video, we're going to be making an Alpine style cheese. So this is going to be pretty unique, one of the more complicated cheeses or more complex cheeses on this channel so far. We're going to be using 4 different cultures. It's going to be a washed rind cheese, and we're also going to use a washed curd technique later on after we cut the curd and start processing them. We'll get to all that. I'll explain what all that means. First, we're going to take 4 gallons of milk. I have pasteurized milk. We're going to add that to our clean, sanitized pot, and then we're going to heat that up to 90 degrees. When we hit 70 degrees, we will add our cultures. And this is what the cultures look like, and these are the amounts that you should be using for 4 gallons. We're going to first add our calcium chloride to our pot because we are using pasteurized milk. If you're not using raw milk, you want to use calcium chloride. It'll help with the curd formation. A couple pieces of equipment we're going to need: a good colander, and then I have an 8-inch tome mold with a follower, and we're going to need a cheese press for this one. If you don't have the cheese press, you can use weights based on the weight schedule that I'll provide you here later on in the video. But this is a Dutch style cheese press. I have a video on that press and how to use it and how to put the weights on it. I love it. I get great results from it every time. All right, I'm going to add my ½ teaspoon of calcium chloride. I'm going to put that in before the milk goes in, because that way the milk will mix in real well when I pour it in. Just need a ½ teaspoon. Now we'll put our milk in, and I'll turn my heat source on and we'll start heating. Alright, we have our milk in. Now I'm going to use my clean sanitized thermometer, put it in here so I can monitor the temperature, and we'll wait till it gets to 70 degrees. We'll add our 4 cultures, and then we'll let it rise to 90 degrees. At that point, we're going to take it off our heat source, try to keep it at 90 degrees as much as possible. You can wrap it with a towel or something like that. We want to let it sit quiet, undisturbed for 1 hour after we get to 90 degrees. At this time, the cultures will be converting lactose, milk sugar, into lactic acid and doing their thing, so it needs to sit quiet for an hour. All right, I'm at about 68 degrees. Have 2 more degrees. When you're heating your milk up, especially this much, you want to make sure you slowly so often. It's going to heat from the bottom naturally, but you want to make sure it's heating evenly. You don't want it real hot at the bottom and then cold up top. You want to make sure you're evenly dispersing the heat through the milk. We're at 70 degrees. Now we're going to add our 4 cultures. You can get all the ingredients through the links in the description of this video. You just want to sprinkle it around the top. Okay, now we're going to add 1/64 of a teaspoon of the Geotrichum Candidum. I will use 1/16 of a teaspoon of Propionic Shermanii. 1/16 of a teaspoon of the Propionic Shermanii. And then the last one, 1/4 teaspoon of MA 4002. Okay, let it rehydrate for a couple minutes. I'm slowly going to stir this. After we stir this for about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, we'll let it continue to rise to 90 degrees, and then we will continue to the next step. We are at 90 degrees now, so what we've done is we put our calcium chloride in, our 4 gallons of milk, we heated it up to 70 degrees. Once we got to 70, we put our 4 cultures in, and now we continue to heat it to 90 degrees, and that's where we are right now. So I'm going to shut off my heat source, take my thermometer out, and I'm just going to take it off this heat source because that continues to be hot. If you have a gas stove that you're using, you probably just shut the flame off and it'll be fine. I'm going to cover this. I'm going to wrap it with something. We want to leave this sit now for 1 hour, 60 minutes, and keep it as close to the 90 degrees as possible. Again, at this time, this is when the bacteria is going to be working, doing its thing, and we will come back in an hour, and then we will add our rennet to coagulate. Our milk has been sitting for an hour. Now it's time to add our rennet. We're going to add 3 milliliters of rennet, which is a little bit more than a ½ teaspoon. Now what we want to do is mix this up real good. You don't want to be splashing it, just as before. You want to make sure the rennet is thoroughly mixed in. And what the rennet's going to do, it's going to form our curd. We're going to let this sit for about 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, you want to check for a clean break. If you do not have a clean break, then you can let it sit a little bit longer. While we're letting our curd sit, we want to heat up a pot of about 1.5 gallons. Should only need about 1 gallon of water to 130 degrees. This is going to be part of the wash curd process. We're going to remove some whey and then pour in the hot water. What that's doing is it's removing residual lactose that's in the whey, removing a food source for the bacteria, so not as much acid will be produced. What's the end result is going to be a somewhat sweeter cheese. All right, our pot's been sitting for 45 minutes. We're going to test for a clean break. If we have a clean break, then we'll continue with cutting the curds. Make a slice in the curd, and then I make a cross slice on that slice and lift up a little bit. If it's a clear separation, then you have a good break. This is actually still a little soft, so I'm going to let this sit for about another 15 minutes, and then we'll test it again. Now what I've done is I let my curd sit a little bit longer just to firm up a little bit more. I wasn't completely happy with the break that I saw, so I'm going to test it again and see if I have a better break. And I do. Okay. All right, at this point, what I'm going to do is we want to cut the curd into 1/4 inch pieces and then let it sit for 5 minutes. What we're doing is, by letting it set, is we're letting the sides of the pieces heal so it doesn't expel too much whey. The curd will end up getting too dry if we just start mixing it. So we want to cut into 1/4 inch pieces and then let it sit for 5 minutes. I just make a series of vertical lines and then horizontal lines. And then when you cut like this, you'll have strips, like from the top going down to the bottom. Kind of want to cut sideways after we do this. I have my curd cut. I'm going to let it sit for 5 minutes so the sides of the small pieces can heal a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stir very slowly for about 15 minutes. And that'll help expel a little bit of the whey from the curds. So now you should have your water heated up. I have mine sitting off to the side here. It's ready to pour in here when we get to that point. We have a little bit of stirring to do first, and then we'll wash the curds. Okay, we've let the curd sit for 5 minutes. The initial cuts can heal. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stir slowly for about 15 minutes, and it should look like this. Okay, we're going to start stirring very slowly. Our curd, look at that in those nice chunks. You can definitely see distinct lines in the curd. So that's good. Very slow. If you see big chunks, use your stirrer and slice them up. All right. I haven't been stirring 15 minutes, but my curd is breaking up pretty good. Again, it's using pasteurized milk. You don't get as good of curd formation as you do with raw milk. It's perfectly fine. You can still make great cheeses with pasteurized milk. But what I'm concerned about is now that these are broken up pretty small, I don't want them to dry out more than I want them to. So I'm not going to sit here and stir for 15 minutes. With cheese making, it's not an exact science. You got to see what you have, see what results you're getting, and then modify from that point. So I'm going to let these sit now. I have been stirring about 8 minutes, I think, very slowly, but they're breaking up. So I'm just going to let these sit for a few minutes, and then what we're going to do is remove a little bit more than 1 gallon of the whey. What we're doing is we're starting the wash curd process. I believe it's a Dutch process. And what we're doing is by removing the whey, we're removing the residual lactose in the whey so the bacteria doesn't have a food source. And hence it won't create as much acid. So it results in a little bit sweeter cheese because there's not as much acid developing. So I'm just going to let this sit a few minutes, and then I'm going to use a cup and just pull out the whey until I have almost 5 quarts out, and then we'll add hot water at 130 degrees slowly back in until we reach 102 degrees. Okay, I'm going to start removing the whey. There are going to be little pieces of curd floating probably. Just try not to get them. If you get a little bit, that's fine. But you mainly obviously you just want the liquid. Okay, I'm gonna dump this. Okay, I'm gonna put my thermometer back in, and we're going to slowly add the hot water while stirring to bring this up to 102 degrees. Okay, I'm gonna put my pot back on my heat source so I can finish bringing it back up to 102. Right now I'm about 92. Okay, now that we're 102 degrees, I'm gonna take my pot off. Again, develop the final curd, and then we will transfer the curd into a form and we start pressing. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a different technique for the initial press than we usually do when pressing cheese. What we're going to do is we're going to I have an 8-inch tome mold here. I'm going to put it into another pot that's big enough to hold it, and then I'm going to put my sanitized cheesecloth in there and line the mold. Then I'm going to transfer the whey about halfway to 3/4 of the way full on the mold, and then I'm going to put the curd in. Once the curd's in, I'll put the cheesecloth over top of it, and I'll put the follower on. So the whole thing will be submerged in whey. The purpose of this is to help get rid of any air pockets in the cheese. We want all air out, and what it'll do is it'll help with the creation of the gas pockets that will form due to the Propionic Shermanii culture. So the purpose of this is to get all of the air out, so we have a nice firm curd, and then we'll remove it and we'll press with the actual cheese press the normal way we usually do. So this is sanitized, my pot's sanitized, and I'm going to put my cheesecloth in and we'll start transferring some liquid. Just as we did when we were starting the curd washing process, I'm just going to use a cup. I'm going to fill it up about halfway on the form. Okay, you can always add more. I don't want to put too much in there and it be pouring out messy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer, I'm going to ladle the curd into my form. Once we get all the curd into the form, we're going to fold the cloth over, put the follower on, and then we're going to put 8 pounds of weight on top. I'll just fill 1 gallon in my pitcher here and put it on top of the follower. That should be fine. And we'll do that for about 30 minutes. Alright, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fold the cloth over. I have my sanitized follower. So I'm going to put that on top. I can feel that it's in the form well. Good. Now I'm going to put my water on top. Or another 8-pound weight. Whatever you have. This does not look safe. But it's straight, so we'll just do that. Alright, so we'll come back in a half an hour. Hopefully we won't have to clean up a bunch of water. We'll come back, take it out of this whey, out of the pot, and then we'll put it into our regular cheese press. I'll get set up next to my sink so the whey can just drain into there, and then we'll start a rotation of pressing at different weights. Now that we've pressed this with 8 pounds for about half an hour, we're going to take our form out of this pot of whey water mixture. We're going to put it on our normal press, and then we're going to press at 25 pounds for a half an hour, take it out, flip it around, readjust the cloth, then we're going to press it for another half an hour at 25 pounds. After that, we'll flip it, and then we'll press for an hour at 40 pounds, and then we'll flip it one more time and press for another hour at 40 pounds. And we should be where we want to be at that point. I have the curd in the form. I have an 8-pound jug at the most farthest out notch, so it triples the weight of that, so it's about 25 pounds. We're going to leave it like this for about a half an hour, and then we'll come back, flip it, and then press it again for 25 pounds. Alright, our cheese has been pressing at about 25 pounds for a half an hour, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to flip it, and then we're going to press for another half an hour at the same weight. And we already have a decent looking consolidation. So this will all turn out nice and smooth at the end. And make sure I have a nice flat, enough cloth, then I can put a nice flat layer on top. Don't want any wrinkles in there. So I want a nice, pretty wheel of cheese when we're done. All right. We flipped the cheese and we pressed it on the other side at 25 pounds. What we'll do is we're going to unwrap it, flip it, rebandage it, and then we're going to put this weight back on, and then plus a 5-pound jug. That'll equal 15 pounds all the way out here. So that'll bring us to about 40 pounds. We want to do 40 pounds of pressure for an hour, and then we'll flip it in an hour, and we'll do another 40 pounds on the other side, and we'll see where we're at. Okay, we are done pressing. We pressed for 25 pounds for half an hour, flipped it another 25 pounds for half an hour, and then 40 pounds on each side. So we are done pressing now, and what we're going to do is we're going to take our cheese out, and we're going to put it in an area that's pretty warm, around 80 degrees if you have that. We're going to let it sit for about 5 to 6 hours. What we want to do is let the pH lower to about 5.5. At that point, we're going to put it in a pot or a container of water that's at 50 degrees. The whole purpose for that is to slow the acidity creation down. So the cold water will slow down the acidity. The final pH after it's been in the water for a period of time, if you're doing this during the day, maybe overnight, should be 5.2. If you don't have a pH meter, that's fine. Just go by the time scales I'm giving you, and you should be fine. So right now, I'm going to take this out, see what the final product looks like. It was already consolidating really well, so I was really happy with it, so it should look great now. And then I'm just going to put it on a bamboo mat right here on my table, on this pan here, so if anything drips, it can drip into this pan. And then I'll leave it here for about 5 or 6 hours. All right, I always love this part. Nice consolidated curd mass. Looks good on that side. Oh yeah. A couple little wrinkles in the bottom, that's okay. That's from the cheesecloth. But look at this. That is a beautiful wheel. Good morning, everyone. All right, it's the next morning after we finished our pressing, and then we let the cheese sit for 5 to 6 hours so it could acidify to about 5.5. Again, if you don't have a pH meter, it's perfectly fine. Mine actually stopped working during this process, so I'm kind of going by the time scale as well. So I let it sit for about 5 hours, and then I put it into water, as I mentioned earlier, that's about 50 degrees. Purpose of this is to slow down the acid production. You still want acid to be produced, but you want a lengthier process to do that. And it'll help with the final texture of the cheese. So this is just plain water here. And here's our wheel. Looks fabulous. Love it. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to put this into a simple brine solution. So we're going to get a gallon of water, 2 1/4 pounds of salt, and then 2 1/2 pounds. We're going to get a gallon of water, 2 1/4 pounds of salt, a tablespoon of calcium chloride, and a teaspoon of white vinegar. You want to make sure the salt's dissolved. That'll be your simple brine. That will be your simple brine solution. Now, as far as timing, you want to do 2 hours per pound of cheese. So if this weighs exactly 4 pounds, then I'm going to brine this for 8 hours. And when you put it in the salt water, unlike this water, you're going to see it's going to float because it's salt water. So what you want to do is when you put your cheese in, you want to sprinkle like a teaspoon on the top of the cheese. It's perfectly fine. And halfway through, whatever those total hours are, if it's 4 pounds and it's 8 hours, 4 hours into it, flip it over, put another teaspoon on top. When those 4 hours are done, then we're done brining. We want to take it out and pat it dry, and then we'll go from there. All right, our cheese has been sitting in the brine for 2 hours per pound. So my cheese weighed just about exactly 4 pounds. So I put it in for 8 hours, 4 hours on each side. Now what we want to do is take it out of there. We'll dry it off a little bit just to get the moisture off, and then we're going to sit it in a room about 68, 70 degrees for a day, just to surface dry. We do not want it to dry out. We don't want it to change color, darken. We don't want it the outside to crack at all. We're just going to do 1 day, just let it air dry a little bit, and then we'll continue to the next step. Okay, our cheese has finished the brining period for 4 hours on each side. After that, I briefly dried it off, and I put it in my warm aging space. About 62 to 64 degrees, and about 85% to 90% humidity. You'll see it's been there pretty much all day, like that, in the warm aging space. And it's starting to feel a little like greasy-ish. That's perfectly normal. It's like wild yeasts on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over and continue the warm aging for about another 5 to 10 days or so, maybe a little bit longer. You'll see in about 5 to 10 days, the gas produced by the culture is going to start to expand the wheel itself. It should bulge out a little bit on the sides. You'll definitely start to get that. The longer you leave this in the warm aging space, the bigger the holes will get. So it's really just to your preference. So in about 5 to 10 days, we'll start seeing that, and then I'll kind of judge from there when to turn down the temperature to our normal 52 degrees and then 95% humidity. Once we do that, every couple days, we're going to, about every 3 to 5 days, we're going to wash the rind. I'll show you what that looks like. I'll explain how to do that once we get to that part, but right now, we should have a wheel cheese that is in the warm aging space and just waiting for the gas to start being produced. All right, I've had my cheese in my warm aging space for about 5 days. Between 5 and 10 days, you'll start to see some bulging. That's the gas being produced within the cheese, creating air pockets, or those voids within the cheese. Mine hasn't really started doing that too much. I think I see a little bit, but what I'm going to do is, because I'm starting to see, I'm getting some white mold on top, on both sides. That's good. I'm starting to see a little bit of darker mold as well. I mean, barely a little bit. What I don't want is it to get too bad. So I'm going to do my first very light wash of the wash rind cheese. Now I'm still going to put it back in my warm aging space, probably for at least another 5 days. From there, we'll drop it down to 52 degrees and also 95% humidity. We're going to want to wash our cheese, why it's called a wash rind, every 3 to 5 days. You'll do that by a cup of water with a tablespoon of non-iodized salt, and then you want to put a pinch of the Geotrichum Candidum and also the bacteria linens in here just to help form the rind on the outside. You store this in your fridge when you're not using it. I'm going to use a sanitized cheesecloth when I do these washes. And what I'll do is I'll dip it in, I'll do the top and then the sides lightly. I'll put it back in the aging space for about a day, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side. And I'll repeat that every 3 to 5 days. But right now I am doing the first one just a little bit early, just so I want to get some salt on here to take care of a little bit of the other mold I'm seeing. If we do this right, we shouldn't be getting greens and blues and all that kind of stuff. It should be kind of like a dusty white rind on both sides. So I'm going to do that right now, and then it'll go into my aging space. I'll continue to do those washes for about 4 to 6 weeks, depends on what kind of character you want the cheese to develop. But after 4 to 6 weeks, you should be able to eat it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and happy cheese making.